Here at The Regenerative Journey, we know that good health is related to good food and good practices, but understand that sometimes the right food choices are quite hard to put into place. But our good buddy, Cindy O'Meara at the Nutrition Academy, is helping people break old habits to create a much healthier lifestyle. So in support of what she's doing, we're offering a $100 discount to all our listeners. Simply enrol in their functional nutrition course and enter the coupon Charlie100, that's Charlie100. The Nutrition Academy, say goodbye to old food habits and hello to a much healthier, happier life.
I don't know any family that doesn't have someone that they love within the family or within their inner circle that struggles at some time in life with mental health. So that's one of my big bugbears, and that leads to homelessness. And of course, women in violent relationships. I mean, these are things, all these things. Now, this is going to sound really naive, but so many of these things can be fixed by food.
That was Maggie Beer, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to country, culture, community, land, sea and sky. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott. Don't forget our spring Intro to Biodynamics workshops are coming up fast. We are at Hannamino in Boorowa in New South Wales on the 7th and 8th of October, then travel to Victoria in mid-October, Tasmania in late October, with our last workshop for the year in the beautiful Margaret River in WA during late November. All are welcome, urban gardeners, broadacre farmers, graziers, viticulturists alike. No previous experience required, as Hamish and Charlie cover it all. For more details, check out our website www.charliearnott.com.au and follow the events link.
G'day, this week's episode is with the one and only Maggie Beer. I was honoured to be sitting in her music room at her house, not a farm, but her house where she resides with her husband Cole. In the Barossa, her farm's in the Barossa as well, not too far from here. But we're sitting here overlooking pomegranate hedges, quince, all sorts of wonderful citrus, and it's an amazing spot. And we chatted about Maggie's, well, you know, as we do, early life, her inspiration, her mentors, what it is for her to be living in the Barossa in this beautiful part of the world, and the Maggie Beer Foundation and the support she's giving the older Australians in terms of their food and their health, and so many other wonderful things. She is as busy a person as you'll ever meet, and I was so honoured to be sitting with Maggie for an hour, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Maggie Beer as much as I did. Maggie Beer, welcome to The Regenerative Journey, and welcome to your music room.
That's
Are we in your music room?
We are. It's a great room for singing in.
It's got a bit of ambience about it.
Yes, well, it's a tall timber ceiling, and the piano goes well here, and I have a choir, and every Wednesday night. Tonight, singing night.
As if you don't have enough on already.
Oh, well, the singing gives me the most amazing amount of energy, and no matter how tired I am. Colin sometimes says he envies me. I can be so dead tired, and an hour and a half, 2 hours singing, and I come in bouncing.
Gives you a lift.
Yes.
It's obviously a local little choir.
Oh, well, it's a pretty serious choir in terms of our director of the choir, Charmaine Jones, she used to be the senior jazz teacher at the conservatorium. She has a professional choir herself, comes from the other side of Adelaide.
Wow.
Some people come from Clare. There's just 17 of us. When I say serious, what I mean is we really work. and the joy is just immense.
Fantastic. And how did that start? We've just gone straight to somewhere I didn't even know we were going to go, but this is good. How did that what does music played a big part in your life?
Well, music played a huge amount in my life. My father and all his brothers and sisters had beautiful voices, but I never sang because my beautiful mum, had the worst voice in the world. And so my brothers and I kind of, took mum's part. But here in the valley, when we had parties, we always finished up, the girls one end and the boys the other end, the girls would sing. And it was just before my 60th birthday. And I said, I'm sick of this. I'm going to find a teacher and we're going to all sing together. And it's been going since then, so 16 years. But
boys and girls?
No, it's all girls, but sometimes we sing, not often enough, but sometimes we sing with the boys' choir in the valley, and that's fantastic. But it's fantastic for the addition of the bass and the tenor and
I'll have to sneak in one day, just listen. I can probably hear it from the other side of the valley.
No, not really. But Matt came one night, Matt and Sarah, and yes, Matt Moran.
Yes, so
mutual friend.
Let's give him a plug. So Matt Moran was very kind enough to introduce me to Maggie. I did meet you really briefly at the Delicious Awards a couple of years ago. You were running out the door and everyone was trying to grab you for a photo op, and I was one of them. Anyway, so big shout out to Matt and for his introduction, and and I have to say I interviewed Matt last year in one of our episodes. Yeah. Lovely, lovely guy. He's up in Rocky at the moment doing Beef Australia.
Yes,
doing some stuff up there. Yeah. And you did a show with him. The Great Australian Bake Off.
Yes.
He said he said good day and he misses you and he loves you.
Matt's a big sweetheart. He's so gruff on the outside and so soft inside.
Isn't he? It doesn't take long to scratch the surface though, does it? Maggie, again, thank you for your time. We're in the middle of, I'm not sure where we are in terms of the middle of the end, or the beginning of Tasting Australia here in South Australia. You're being pulled from pillar to post, I'm sure, to do all sorts of things. So I very much appreciate the hour we have with you this morning. And I've sort of set up in your music room. We're looking out at the Barossa, some part of the Barossa. We're sort of on the eastern side, aren't we, from my sort of orientation?
Well, I'll take your word for it, because I'm legendary about my lack of direction. But yes,
well, I think we are, and we're looking at some olives. We've got a beautiful pomegranate hedge. We've just driven. I just drove past a field. I've never seen a bigger orchard of quince.
Yes. Well, we're picking today, and we've got all these windfalls as well. So picking started yesterday for the quince harvest. So it'll be going on all week.
Because you're pretty well known for your quinces, aren't you?
Yes.
You do a bit with quince.
We do a bit with quince. I love the quince, and we planted our first quince orchard 35 years ago. Yes.
Here?
No.
At the farm.
At the farm, probably even longer. Gosh, years come into each other. But we've been here in the cottage 36 years and planted the quince, 6 different varieties here to see which is the best for various things, but it doesn't always work.
I have to say it's one of my favourite fruit. And
really?
Oh, totally. My mum, we've got quince. Medlar. Have you got medlars?
Yes, we've got medlars. 2 medlars. Do you blet them?
Yes. they're still on the fruit.
Yes, they're still on the tree
at the moment.
Yeah.
And then often we get big bread rack, the plastic bread things that probably always belong to
someone else.
The property of fielders or someone. Anyway, so we pop them on the either on the back veranda or we've got a sort of a flower room officey thing. And every third year, I remember they're there, and I make some. The last time I made a beautiful. It was supposed to be like a jelly, but it turned into a syrup.
Oh yes,
it was insane.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic flavour. It's like nothing else. It's a bit like, gosh, what would you put it like? Asparagus. Yeah, there's something there that does not say fruit.
It is, and you don't see them around. We've got sort of probably half a dozen trees, and I think one thing I've noticed, Maggie, is, I don't know, we're off on another tangent, but that's cool. nets. I don't see any nets on your fruit. Is that because there's no birds to eat them? Or what do you do?
No,
or do you have to do some
took
spooky wah-wah to keep them away?
I wish we had spooky wah-wah, but we don't. But we took the nets off 3 days ago, but we only put the nets on pretty close to harvest, say 2 weeks before harvest.
Okay.
And the nets came off on Friday. But the thing is, the nets, of course, also inhibit birds can get caught in them, and so you have to be careful. But we have an orchard at the farm, and birds are, if we don't cover our apricots, we don't have a crop. So the birds aren't quite as bad here, even though we've got lots of gum trees. But
my family and I were in Italy a couple of years ago, and we noticed there were no nets and there were hardly any birds, and everywhere there was fruit. Like, you just help yourself.
But you know why?
Because they eat them.
Because they shoot. They shoot, and if you're in the hills in Italy, you hear the guns going off all the time, and there's not a bird to be seen because...
That's more fun than netting trees, I guess, isn't it?
Well, it depends on your point of view.
Yeah, that's true. How rude. So where are we now? Quince's. So Maggie, the point of being here at your, and thank you again for being in your home, is to be somewhat inspired and be in your sort of happy place. Yes. So, which this is amazingly happy part of the world. The Barossa itself. Can we talk about why is it important? Why is it important for you to be here, or what is special about this place?
Well, I grew up in Sydney, in the western suburbs of Sydney, where you didn't know your neighbours, where it was pretty bland, and it's much more interesting now, Bankstown and Lakemba and Greenacre. So, and I travelled a great deal, but when Colin and I came to live in the Barossa, and his forebears came here in 1848, so from Silesia. So he's allowed to be a local, right?
Where's Silesia?
Silesia, well, that's where all the people came. It's Poland now, but it was Germany.
Oh, okay.
And they're the people, along with the English, who settled the valley. The English settled Angaston, etc. But when we came here, I felt connected straight away. And we came here 48 years ago. And it was just as if it was meant to be. And I don't know whether it was anything to do with my maiden name is Ackerman. So the German influence, but my German influence went back, generations, but somehow it's there. I just revelled in being here, learning from people, learning the rhythm of the seasons and living the rhythm of the seasons, something I'd never taken any notice of in Sydney, even though I grew up in a fantastic food household. My father was obsessive about food, and we had every bit of the animal, all the things that were part of me. And then I came here and understood seasons. So it is a community. It's beautiful. It's a Mediterranean climate. I can grow everything that I want to cook with, everything I want to eat. I'm connected. Yeah.
It's an amazing... last time I was here, Maggie, was 30 years ago, not quite 30, in a old beaten up Kingswood station wagon with a couple of mates, and we'd driven down from Broome. We'd been pearl diving for the year up there with the Paspalis, and we had a car that we had just to drive around Broome just when we came back off the boats and for a couple of days. So we got to the end of the year and went, let's just drive this baby home. And we did, all the way down to WA, across the Nullarbor, a couple of days here. It was fantastic, and it was really a really fond couple of days we had here. What I can remember of it, 30 years ago, and wine growing part of the world, and we were 19, wherever we were. But it struck me as a beautiful place, and have been here since Thursday, and I'm just blown away with the generosity and the hospitality and the sort of lack of competition or something. What is it?
Well, it's really interesting you say that. There's a realness about here. The hospitality is within, and it's given naturally, and we all believe in each other, and so we're just all part of a whole. And it's a fantastic way. When I'm overseas, if I could be in London doing something when we used to be, and for the industry, there'd be all what would seem to be competitors in the one room, but they were all Barossa first, and it's always been so. It's fantastic aura to sort of live in.
It's somewhat contagious too. I imagine that whilst it does take probably 3 generations to be a local, so you're not a local yet, are you? No.
Well, I think I'm allowed to be a local now.
Do the Barossanese call you a local? I hope so.
I think they do.
You've helped put Barossa on the map.
I know they do. I'm allowed. I was allowed in quite early, actually, which is interesting. What credentials did you have to get in? Well, it's funny. I ran for council when my girls were just 2 and 4. I don't know what drove me to do that, but I got elected in unopposed.
Wow.
And I used to sit in council meetings peeling pickled quail eggs while they were the days. I could never just sit still. I always had to be doing something, but I was accepted very readily because I came here and fell in love with it, fell in love with the whole concept. The first month we were here, it was the Vintage Festival and that whole sense of celebration around food, and so it just happened. And
Colin, you came here because Colin's family was from here, was it?
From near here, a little town on the plains called Medlar, that no one knows about unless they're into racing. But his forebears were buried here in the Barossa, 1840. They came out on the Alfred. So he sort of has a real toehold.
Toehold, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And so was the intention when you moved to the Barossa to, grow food, cook and sort of, encourage others to do so? Or was it sort of like, I'm just going to go and see what happens?
No, but it was Colin's vision. We were living in Sydney and I had very high pressure jobs and I used to get these terrible migraines.
Sorry, what were you doing in Sydney, can I ask?
Oh, well, I was the citizenship clerk for the American Consul General, so they put me through citizenship law, and then I managed the Women's College at Sydney Uni, the food in the house. So, and I loved my jobs, but they were so high pressure, and on Friday night I'd get a migraine until Monday morning. And Colin was working in computers for Pricewaterhouse and other companies, and he hated Sydney. And so it was his vision to farm pheasants because he'd done his commercial pilot's license in New Zealand, couldn't get a job in the industry because it was 1969 when there was a real slump. No one was taking anyone on. And so this vision of his to farm pheasants seemed absolutely a great idea. I was going to do viticulture. Enology. I was going to go to Roseworthy, I thought, because I've got a palate. And so I was going to become a winemaker. That was the thought behind us coming. He was going to farm. And as it turned out, I didn't have science, so I didn't go into enology, and life overtook us in farming, having children, and the only reason I started to cook commercially, inverted commas, is that Cole won a Churchill Fellowship, and we went to Europe and saw exactly what we wanted to do on the border of Scotland, which was a farm shop on a turkey farm where they sold everything, including the feathers. And so we came back and sold our house, built the farm shop on the property that we had, and opened the doors. And of course, I always cooked. I've never been taught, but I was brought up in this household of beautiful food, and I just cooked everything we grew. And so the farm shop, within a year, morphed into a restaurant. I mean, outrageous. We had no experience. And so that's that's how it all happened, just using our produce and our neighbours. And it just did.
Went from there. Well, that was my next question, Maggie, was there a plan?
There's never been a plan. And we were both risk takers. Both our families were small business people. And if you think about the fact that we married 16 weeks after we met 51 years ago.
Good for you.
So that's risk-taking, and that risk-taking has been every part of the way. But we always were I was the driven one, Colin was the sensible one and practical one, and also the head for figures.
It's a good combo.
Yeah. So.
And I forgot my next question there now. It's terrible. Because you were, I guess, and I'm sort of no expert in I love my food and I'm sort of not necessarily haven't been in the food industry for my whole life. Well, apart from growing it, I guess. Yeah. But because I'm fascinated with the quince thing, because that's when I first saw your name on a jar in a shop, and I went, oh, this is cool. And I knew and the relationship was Mum was growing them in the garden, and I'd never seen them anywhere else. And I said, oh, this is lady down in South Australia growing quince. Why the fascination? I mean, I guess there's citrus and there's pomegranate and there's everything else, but was quince a particular love? Yeah,
absolutely. And when we first came to the valley, I got a job because, there was no money coming in. I got a job as a real estate agent. I mean, the things that you do. But I'd been looking at properties, and I used to get the bus over from Sydney to go and see a property. So the agent offered me a job, and I took it, and for a year and a half, I guess. And the thing about that was every farmhouse I ever saw when I was showing someone a property, even if it was ramshackle, there'd be a quince tree. And so I saw this quince tree surviving, and I'd see it in flower, I'd see it in fruit, and I'd never seen one. And so it was just everywhere in the Barossa. Just one tree usually, but it just captured me somehow. As you know, it's got the most beautiful blossom. And the fruit, when you pick the fruit, like I've got it in the hallway there, the scent of the quinces permeates the house. So I fell in love with it. And so it just seemed the most natural thing. And the other thing is I always looked to the Mediterranean for ideas of how to use my produce, because we are a Mediterranean climate, and that's my propensity is to cook in that very produce-driven way and simply. And so I saw from Portugal and Spain the membrillo, and that's quince. And so, yes, let's grow a quince orchard, and yes, let's put in an olive grove, and it was already vines and birds. Let's grow pomegranates. It just happened. And Colin was always very good about it.
I know that's the first pomegranate hedge I've seen, and I've heard about it, and we have some great friends who are, know their trees, and that's one of the things, say in terms of around a vegetable garden or just as a border for something, they're just amazing.
It was so beautiful because in this climate, in 3 years, that was hedge height. And, of course, last night I picked the pomegranates because we're going to Kangaroo Island in a few days, and I needed to have lots to crush with Campari.
Good for you. We had one at we visited Kleski Farm the other day on Saturday, and Kim and Amy there to have a little tree, and it was enormous, and we just broke it open, and it was the most beautiful pomegranate I've ever had, and it was and I was picking the seeds out, and Angelica, my wife, who's sort of heart for towel. I know, she's going, what are you doing that for? You bloody eat them. So I don't want to grow a pomegranate out my bum. So were there points, were there sort of moments along the way, Maggie, in the development of the farm and the sort of, the non-planned sort of journey where there was a significant moment, a turning point, that it was a sort of a yes or a no or a do or a die sort of thing that happened that changed the course of...
Oh, absolutely, and there always is, isn't there? But for us, it's really marked in that we went from the farm shop to the pheasant farm restaurant, as I said, audaciously. But to everyone's surprise, everyone's amazement, in 1991 we won Remy Martin, a gourmet traveller Remy Martin top restaurant in Australia. And all we were was a little country restaurant. I was just cooking everything to hand. And this Patricia Wells from France chose us against all others. And what happened was, all of a sudden, what was a cult following turned out to be, helicopters in the ram paddock, people vying for a table. And I went from being full, we went from being full on the weekends to full every moment we were open. And I'm obsessive, and I was always at the stoves, and I had great people around me. But Colin just got sick of people coming in and saying, when you get to meet Col and talk to him, you'll realise he has a very acerbic wit. And when people would say, I've been waiting all this time to come here, and he'd say, sit down, I'll look after you soon. And see, we didn't change. We were just a small country restaurant. And then people's perception were, because we won this award, we would be glitz and glamour. And most of the customers were amazing, but there was always that percentage that was looking for the glitz and glamour, and Colin just couldn't. And it was burning.
You put him in their place.
And it was burning me out because I would not leave the stove. So he came in one day and said, it's a restaurant or me. And I said...
good call.
and that was 2 years, nearly 2 years in, and because it was just so intense. It was so... just so unrelenting. And I didn't even hesitate. He was more important. And so I said, but I want 4 months. I want to close the day before our youngest daughter, Ellie's 18th birthday, because she always wanted a proper mum.
Oh, good for you.
And so in that 4 months, I gave no choice to anyone. If it was stuffed pig's ears, that's what they got. And
it's like the nonna, just like this is what it is today. Yeah. You just have it, take it, leave it.
But Col always says on the night before the last service, we got it right.
Oh no! But did Col let you? Did he let you back in the kitchen every now and again though?
Well, look, we had such a celebration party, and then it took me a year to recover because I was so burnt out.
Yeah.
Food is important to me, to us, every day of my life. There's no day I don't want to cook, unless Colin wants to cook for me. That happens sometimes.
Is Colin a good student of cooking? Does he listen? Do you hover around Colin when when he picks up the wrong pan?
He wants me to hover because he wants instruction as we go.
Oh, okay.
And then he says, "Leave it to me." So
Because my wife is half Italian, and she's a wonderful cook and very intuitive, I guess, and just great in the kitchen. And so when I sort of wander in there, and I was a bachelor for a while too, so I could cook some eggs, and that's sort of basic stuff. And I pick up the wrong pan, the sort of the what are you doing? Oh no, I'm not sure if I'd be using that pan. And I'd last 5 minutes. I'm going, I'm out of here. I'm not going to put up with this.
Well, see, we've had this great rule in our house. I cook, he cleans.
Yeah,
and it's fantastic. But we often do it together. Well, he'll be in the kitchen as I cook, or I'm not always in the kitchen as he cleans.
You're sort of lounging around.
Looking for more information to assist your regenerative journey? Come join Charlie and his guests around the kitchen table, an online community of supporters with exclusive access to the Regenerative Journey interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions, a chance to engage with other like-minded people and more. Go to www.charliearnott.com.au/The Kitchen Table, and we look forward to sharing a yarn with you. Now let's get back to this week's episode.
Maggie, you've been a mentor to so many people. Who are some of the mentors in your life early?
The mentors in my life have all been women, and starting with my Aunt Gladys, because I left school at 14 because my parents lost their business, and I was offered a scholarship to stay on, but my parents didn't want it. But my Auntie Glad was a headmistress, and so she kept my education going through books, and I've been a reader all my life, but she just subliminally kept that going. And then in the American consulate, when in 1970, after we married and I got that job, Erna Beckett was the consul, and she believed in me and put me through citizenship law, and she taught me how to assess how you can do better without it being criticism.
Okay, cool.
Which incredibly important. And then
how do you do that?
Well,
is there some little tips you can give us?
Well, I guess my way, it depends on the recipient. But
they're your husband, or
it depends on the recipient. But for instance, in the days of the pheasant farm, at the end of each day, I would say, "What could we do better?" But I would assess it every day because, people use the term continuous improvement now, and I was on it from the moment I ever started, just inherently. But I've never seen it as criticism, but some people do, so I have to be aware of that. But when you live in a culture of what can you do better, it's not ever criticism. And the next person, so that was a terribly valuable lesson. And then Doreen Langley, who was the principal of the Women's College, she believed in me too and gave me great support. And she retired at 70 and then went and did criminology. That kind of person that life is about continually learning. And then I think Stephanie Alexander was always, if ever her knowledge, if ever I needed to know something particularly, Stephanie was. I've learned a lot from her, and particularly with her Kitchen Garden Foundation, which has then
incredible.
Then given me almost a blueprint for what I do with aged care in a few tangible ways.
I want to get to that. Maggie, talking about sort of mentors, were there any sort of little, life lessons or sort of phrases or quotes or sort of just significant gems, that are sort of the pillars of what you do, any sort of things that are,
the pillars.
If you were to write a book about Maggie Beer's pillars of life.
Okay, that you need to be dogged if you have something you really want to achieve. You need to have that. I guess I'm very lucky that I was born with an optimism, and that came from my mother, and so seeing the glass half full, not half empty, being absolutely committed and don't stop at the first brick wall. The joy of finding a solution to go around or over that wall is really something that gives you a great feeling of surviving sometimes, or excelling other times. Being connected, you cannot do life alone, whether it's connected to an individual, a family, or a community, and never stopping to learn, always always just driving yourself through interest, not because you have to. So you have to find that thing that interests you. And the other thing is have joy in your life about food and music and art and reading. Have other things you love to do. So, yeah, that's about it.
Maggie, any paradigms that you sort of grew up with, or you were your original sort of pillars of behaviour or thinking that for whatever reason have been turned right around? Like your sort of attitude to things, through your life.
I think what I grew up with, the feeling of, all right, I grew up with this beautiful food life, hardworking parents, lost their business, but yet that certainly gave me the grit to know I could do anything at a very young age, but always there was caring for other people was very much part of it. And it's not a life philosophy, but it's just a lived philosophy. And I guess, and my children, our children, have had exactly the same. So I'm not sure that that's what you were asking, but
no, that's important though.
Yeah, but no, nothing has turned itself on its head. It's just been living and always trying, not trying, as well as working very hard. You have to have other things in life.
Yeah, totally. So, because you're a pretty multi-talented kind of lady.
I'm not sure about that.
I mean, you're more than just a cook, aren't you?
Well, I love to write. I love to write, and I had no idea I could write because, having left school so early. But the one thing I learned at school was how to type. And so I still can type at about 100 words a minute. And when I'm thinking, I close my eyes and just sit, and it just rolls off, and I don't even edit it.
Good for you. It's a bit like this. This is not getting edited. So if you say any rude words, they're going to stay.
It's writing, and I love to share what I love about life and know about cooking, and how what reward it is for you personally, but how simple it can be. So to demystify it for people so they feel comfortable having a go.
No, I think it's a great point, and that's what I was sort of reflecting on this morning, is that you make it very, very approachable, very real, you don't sort of pump it up with mystery or intrigue, or it's like, anyone can cook.
Well, absolutely. And because there's such a joy from cooking and eating well and having people around the table, and then going back a step, gardening, your vegetables to bring into the, to pick and then bring into the kitchen. And it is within everyone's grasp, but not everyone has been brought up that way. But COVID, in fact, has done a great, for all the trauma of COVID for so many people, the one thing it has done is brought them back to cooking as a family more, because they were trapped, if you like, at home. But also thinking Australian, thinking local. We have to hold on to that.
It was a real catalyst, wasn't it? Talking about cooking, I only referenced this story the other day. A friend who had been working with some school, some disadvantaged or I guess special needs kids, had been working in their facility and helped them grow food. And they had some garden beds and they were growing food. Kids who didn't eat much food, and their range of sort of diet was very narrow, and never sort of planted food and anything, cared for it at all. As part of this program, they had video of the kids in the garden, the raised beds, and then they had video of the kids in the kitchen cooking it and eating it, and they showed the video to the parents. And the parents go, no, that's not my kid. I can't. And these kids are eating broccoli, okay? And the whole connection of, you know, that responsibility and the privilege and the wonderful eating, planting the food, it's that whole journey of life.
But that's why Stephanie Alexander has been such a visionary. This program is in over 2,000 schools across Australia. But the whole, not everyone has the whole program because of funds, etc. But they start composting, they start growing and cooking and sitting around the table and trying everything, and no one's allowed to say yuck.
Is that the rule?
Well, that's my interpretation. Sorry.
Don't say no, say oh. So and that is, you know, that creates new normals, doesn't it? You know, kids go home and they go, why aren't we cooking growing food? Why aren't we doing this and doing that, you know, and why aren't we going to the farmer's market to get the fresh stuff?
Exactly right. And there's been so much that's, you know, been captured not only anecdotally but from the point of qualitative research, if you like. This is what happens in so many cases. The children inspire the parents.
And there's plenty of science around. They've done it in prisons, in sort of nunneries, which are reasonably sort of closed sort of situation, where, you know, moving from a frozen food or a processed food diet to a fresh diet, it's been you know, the inmates are making, and then literally they think differently.
Well, you know, there's lots of science, as you say, but there's lots of science about how good it is for your health. But there's now science coming out of things that we inherently knew, that the joy of food is part of the well-being in your brain. It actually sort of turns on whatever it is, neurons. So there's work that's being done out of English universities that are sort of proving that now. So if ever we doubted it, and I certainly didn't, and people who love food don't, but it should set up, talking about a new paradigm, it should set up a new paradigm for life overall, if only everyone had the chance to eat well.
Another good reason to eat good food.
Yeah.
I did an interview with Cindy O'Meara, who's a sort of nutritionist, and she's just a fantastic advocate for clean, fresh, nutritious food. And she told a story about her friend who had moved to sort of had changes in her life, and she went to some outback stations and to be the cook. And she got there, opened the cupboard, and there was, you know, Maggi noodles and a tin of baked beans.
Gravox.
Yeah, Gravox, yeah, all that stuff, you know, processed everything. And she said she sort of took note of the mental state of everyone in the camp, you know. Anyway, she said to the boss, look, you need to build me a veggie garden. And he did. And over the course of the next few months, with the fresh food and her cooking in the kitchen and her just a general attitude, the boss one day turned around and said, I can't believe what's happened here, because all the men, all the ringers were just, you know, not drinking as much more effective in their work, much happier, and the boss himself was. It was like, what a change there.
Yeah.
Food.
Yeah. Oh, you don't have to tell me.
No, I just think it's fascinating, and, you know, to support that sort of a thing.
And the stories that you can tell about that, people hang on to stories, and it's real and not just some notion. It's great to share those.
We need a Stephanie Alexander outback station program.
Yes.
Same sort of thing. Yeah. Now let's get to your program, Maggie, your foundation, and you're doing some wonderful things in the sort of the elderly world of elderly people.
Older Australia.
Older Australia.
I'll help you out.
People in the prime of their lives. Tell me about that, because I think it's fascinating.
Well, I have. In 2014, I established a foundation to change the food in aged care because it is, when food is so important to me, I have a responsibility now, having seen that in aged care there are some really good people and there are a lot of people working incredibly hard and caring a lot. But there is a huge proportion of food that is institutionalised. And we can't accept that, and we can't accept many of the budgets that are given to have 3 meals a day in morning and afternoon tea. They are so small that they cannot do what needs to be done. But more than that, there is no training for this really complex arena that's specific to aged care. And my friend Simon Bryant, who I did cook in the chef with for so many years, he said the first time we put the foundation again, his words were, being a cook or chef in an aged care home is far more complex than any cook in a restaurant, except for perhaps, your top level. That is a different thing. But so I'm looking for cultural change. I'm looking for budget. But more than anything, the sharing of knowledge and skill, and raising the bar of how the cook or chef has got to have this knowledge and skill, so then they are respected as the person that can do the very most for the resident that they are looking after, more than anything else. But it has to be a collaborative journey with the health professionals and the management, and it is just out. We must do it. We cannot leave people in aged care with nothing to look forward to because of those that are in homes where it is institutionalised, and when there can be budgets as low as $6 a day for 3 meals and morning and afternoon tea. So of course the cook or chef has got no option but to use frozen veg and packet boosters for their chicken soup, and that is just unacceptable. Yeah. And
at a time of their lives where they are probably as needy as any other time for good nutrition, just for cognitive function and just for being healthy.
That is such an important point. As we age, we need a different kind of diet. We need protein. Well, everyone needs protein, and all through the day, not just at one meal. Most importantly, for those in aged care, need 4 servings of dairy, whereas other ages sort of are eschewing the need for dairy, wrongly in my opinion, but there is a real nutritional need that is different for the older Australian. That's not known, and without good firstly, there has to be, for me, equal measures of nutrition and pleasure. Without pleasure, what is there? And without the nutrition, so their bodies don't lose muscle mass, so they're not physical. So how can, if they're not physical because their food isn't good enough, how can they be involved in life, like be out in the garden, connection, all those things? Food can change all of that.
That was I saw a show not that long ago, and it was I was imagining on the ABC, and they brought 4-year-olds.
Oh yes, it's beautiful. It's running again. Oh, it's the amazing. Second series, and it just shows intergenerational connectedness. People think, there is a propensity to put older people out of mind, and that's another thing that's not acceptable. But that beautiful show on the ABC where you have these 4-year-olds relating to the older and what it does for each other. So, I mean, the perfect scenario. Montessori have got a pretty good scenario there. The Montessori method where they bring all generations together, the having focus, having things to do, allowing everything you do for me, you take away from me, right? And so if you just presume because someone's in aged care, they need everything done for them, well, that's wrong. But they also have to have the impetus that comes from food to be involved.
That's right.
And pleasure is a good thing.
I'll tell you, at all ages, and I just get goosebumps thinking about that show. And there was also another. I'm not sure it was a show or a program in somewhere in Scandinavia, and they were university students were being billeted with elderly. Not elderly people.
Older Australians.
Older Australians. Older peoples. Yeah. And that was wonderful for both as well.
Well, yes, and there are some little openings of that happening in Sydney where, but
cool.
the concept there is the student gets free accommodation and board for giving energy and companionship to the person in the house to keep people in their own home. It's a wonderful concept. And in fact, you know, this drive for food being the medium for change has to come out into the community too, because so many older Australians stay in their own home because that's their want, and I understand that entirely, and the government wants that too. But without the support, without a connectedness, loneliness and depression, and things that we must
trying to
rile against.
Yeah, mitigate against. Because for me, it's about perspective, isn't it? Like the kids get the children give the older Australians, the older generation, a different perspective on life, don't they?
They do. They give them this energy and this the children's acceptance of everything, right?
And they're innocent, so they're just like the stuff they say.
But it also gives the children a respect for the older.
Oh, totally.
And it's beautiful.
Maggie, just changing the course a little. Is there anything you're irate about at the moment? Anything that you don't seem like a very irate kind of person? I wouldn't want to get on your bad side, but is there anything that you that's getting on your goat at the moment?
Oh, look, there's if I had more time in life, there'd be a lot more I'd be involved with.
You've got plenty of time. Stop it. I won't hear it.
But the whole concept of mental health and the in regional areas, the lack of support, the inequity of how people with mental health are often treated, and the fact that we don't talk about depression and suicide, because there is no doubt. I'm involved with Pat McGorry, who was Australian of the Year when I was Senior Australian, and so I understand a lot of that work. And I don't know any family that doesn't have someone that they love within the family or within their inner circle that struggles at some time in life with mental health. So that's one of my big bugbears, and that leads to homelessness. And of course, women in violent relationships. I mean, these are things, all these things. Now, this is going to sound really naive, but so many of these things can be fixed by food.
Totally.
And mental health being one of them.
Totally.
Violence, independence somehow. All of those things, they're just part of our life that we can't accept.
Well, I guess this is what I'm fascinated about when I interview my guests on the show, and it's called The Regenerative Journey, and it sort of started as a regenerative agriculture type of focus. But my journey in this process is, what do farmers do? They grow food, It's kind of like when I start a thing, I'll go, hey, put your hand up if you eat food. Like, yeah, it's kind of important,
Yeah.
And everything comes back to food and how it's produced, because if it's produced poorly, it's crap food. It's not going to be nutritious. If it's produced well, then it's a fair chance that, the food's going to be good, but the environment in which that food has been produced has been enhanced as well. Oh. It's kind of an important thing, and it's what we put into our bodies. And as we've just said, it is what is the catalyst for, cognitive function, good or bad, or, high or low, vibrations, literally, and the higher thinking or the lower thinking. So it's kind of, thank you for being such a advocate of good food.
Well, and know the lack of preservatives, and having grown up never using preservatives, never serving them for using preservatives or processed food with our family, and then having a business created on the basis of no preservatives, except for the sulfur in wine.
Yeah.
But everything about as natural as it can be, and it's what has always driven me.
Just back to the farm when you started here. Was anyone else doing that when you arrived?
The pheasant farming?
Yeah.
There was...
just like having a farm shop and having people turn up to your farm.
No. And the crazy thing is it was successful in terms of numbers from day one, and yet we're on a back road, and of course, and Samuel Road that comes off Seppelsfield Road wasn't tarred, wasn't sealed, and you'd see all these fancy cars in this little old farm outside this little old farm shop. So yes,
you're a real pioneer there.
Well, we were part of all over Australia. There were people here and there starting to do great things. Yes, the 70s were a really different time. So people sort of fell upon us because the food was good. Simple but good.
There you go. The food was good. Talking about other things that are good, is there anything that you are really excited about, you're really pumped about at the moment?
Yes, and well, what I am is pumped about is music and the opera and the arts and South Australia and Tasting Australia and the fact that, we have so many. I so believe in South Australia. And we're small, and as a city you can walk around from place to place, and whether it's the Fringe Festival, the Adelaide Festival, the Guitar Festival, the Cabaret Festival, we have such, and now, post-COVID, having music again at Eucharia in the hills, there is just so much that happens in South Australia about music, and I love everything to do with music and voice and opera, and it's all alive again.
It is, and we're coming out of COVID, and as you say, we've learnt a lot. I trust that people have, because if we haven't, then that's a real waste of an opportunity to be cooking our own food and growing our own food. And you can't buy caravans at the moment. You can't buy horse floats, I know, because I'm trying to get one, because everyone's staying local and they're getting back to their roots.
And they're being more, particularly in the cities, they're being more cognizant of their neighbours that they've only ever nodded to before. And friends of ours that live in the city say, I'm now cooking for my neighbour across the road because I realise they're on their own and probably as old as me.
Oh, stop it.
So, that caring for others, let it never diminish.
No, let's not have any normality in terms of travel and COVID stuff. Stop that from being the new normal. Maggie, I'm conscious of the time. You have to go to something else. One last question: if you could have a billboard erected on the side of a busy highway somewhere that lots of people could read, what would you nominate? You could have rude words, you could have a quote, you could have a question, you could have anything you want. No pictures, just words. No, just words. It would have to be garden, cook and share your table with your family and be connected to the people around you. Yeah. We can make it that big. It's fine. And enjoy life. Yeah. Well, you certainly have enjoyed life, Maggie, and I'm eternally grateful that you've given me your time today. I know you have to rush off. I will be seeing you a bit later on today at Alkena Wine Estate, and you're a guest, and I'm going to be sitting on a stool at the end of the table talking about, I don't even know yet. Amelia, what am I talking about? But I've had such a lovely time there in the last few days doing our 2-day biodynamic workshop, and they've been most amazing hosts. Again, another wonderful example of the hospitality that I think everyone really experiences when they come to the Barossa. I thank my lucky stars that the Barossa has given me so much, coming and living here and being part of the Barossa. I have to pinch myself. Everything has come from that. Well, I'm pinching myself still just sitting here next to you, Maggie. So, and I'll be doing that again in a couple of hours. You must get to your next appointment.
Yes.
And I need to rearrange your music room because I've trashed it. Maggie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie.
Next week on The Regenerative Journey, I'll be speaking with Tammy Jonas of Jonai Farm down there in Victoria. She's fantastic. So many good yarns about her regenerative journey, her involvement with her farm, and the food culture down there. It's just too many things to even name, but you will be kicking yourself if you miss next week's amazing episode with Tammy Jonas on The Regenerative Journey.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.